Claire Tillman was born on January 14, 1977, in a small British village called Greenhithe. She was an only child and attended an all-girls school where she had many friends. Even as a child, Claire was focused and determined. She dreamed of becoming one of the first female firefighters in the country. In high school, she even volunteered at charity events organized by the local fire department, helping out in any way she could. Still, she wanted to earn a college degree before entering that line of work. In January of 1993, when she was 16, she was in the middle of her final exams and thinking about her future education. On January 18th, just 4 days after her birthday, Claire went out to a friend's house. They planned to discuss college options and decide where they might want to apply. She left home around 6 p.m., telling her mother she would be back in about an hour and a half. But when that time came and went, there was no sign of Claire. At first, her mother thought she had probably just lost track of time, maybe stayed a bit longer at her friend's place. But when the clock passed 8 p.m., she began to worry. She called the friend's house, only to find out that Claire had never arrived. Thinking that perhaps plans had changed, she started calling a few of Claire's other friends, but no one had seen her that night. A few minutes later, Claire's mother stepped outside and ran into a neighbor. He mentioned that something had happened a few miles away. There were ambulances and several police cars at the scene. Claire's mother was really starting to worry, so she went straight to the local police station to report her daughter missing. She provided them with a full description, but instead of taking her report, the officers told her to go home. They said there had been some kind of incident, and that someone would come by soon to explain everything. A little while later, the police arrived at her door and delivered the news no parent ever wants to hear. Her daughter had been found dead just hours earlier. Earlier that evening, 2 men had been driving along a road that connected several nearby towns. As they passed some houses, they noticed a girl kneeling by the roadside and pulled over to check on her. The moment they got a closer look, they knew something was seriously wrong. She was struggling to breathe and appeared completely disoriented. One of them ran to a nearby pub to call for help, while the other stayed with her. At first, he thought she might have been hit by a car since she was so close to the road. He tried to comfort her, but her condition quickly worsened. Within minutes, she stopped breathing entirely, and by the time paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Her body was taken to the medical examiner, and the results were devastating. She had been stabbed 9 times, likely with a large knife, but there were no signs of sexual assault. Meanwhile, police began examining the scene and quickly determined where the attack had taken place. Claire had most likely been ambushed in a narrow alleyway that branched off the main road, leading toward her friend's house. Based on the wounds, they believed the killer had attacked her from behind. Beyond that, however, there wasn't much to go on. The alley was quiet, dark, and empty. There were no security cameras nearby, no witnesses, and no useful evidence. Still, one detail stood out. According to the medical examiner, the murder weapon wasn't just any knife. It was unusually large, too big to be something someone would casually carry in their pocket. Detectives believed the killer had brought it from home, already planning to use it on someone. News of the murder spread quickly through Claire's village and nearby towns. That evening, some students were still at school for exam prep sessions when they heard about the incident on the radio. At first, no one knew the victim's name, but it didn't take long for word to spread. With no solid leads, police turned to the public for help. A few people came forward, saying they had seen a man in a light-colored coat near the road around 7 p.m. Another witness claimed to have seen a man with dark curly hair walking out of the alleyway, but no one could identify either of them, even though it was a small community where most people knew each other. Based on the nature of the attack, detectives considered the possibility that the killer might have known Claire and had a personal motive. But there was also a more unsettling theory. This might not have been an isolated incident. They feared they might be dealing with a serial offender. In December 1988, for years before Claire's murder, a 27-year-old woman was attacked by an unknown man while walking home from work. Armed with a gun and a knife, he kidnapped her and drove out of town, where he attempted to assault her. Then, he stabbed her 5 times and left her there, apparently believing she was dead. But somehow she survived. Despite her injuries and the freezing cold, she managed to crawl to a nearby road, where she was eventually found by a group of workers. She spent 9 days in intensive care, and doctors were able to save her life. However, police were never able to track down the man responsible. And now, after Claire's murder, both detectives and locals began to wonder, what if the same person was behind both attacks? A few days later, Claire's funeral was held, and hundreds of people from the community attended. Just before the ceremony, her parents spoke with reporters and shared their belief that the killer might show up. Detectives had the same suspicion, so they attended the service and discreetly observed every single person who came. But even that didn't bring them any closer to finding the person responsible. In the weeks that followed, police continued questioning locals and pursuing leads, but nothing came of it. More than 2 years passed, and it began to seem like the case would never be solved. People slowly stopped talking about what had happened, until one day, everything changed. On October 17, 1995, a local woman was walking home from work when she was attacked by a man just a few hundred yards from where Claire had been stabbed. The attacker struck her with a knife, and when she fell and screamed, he fled the scene. Despite her injuries, the woman survived, but once again, detectives hit a dead end. Since the attacker came from behind, she hadn't seen his face or noticed any clear features. Still, this time police caught a break. A witness came forward, saying they had seen a white Ford nearby with some distinctive modifications. That detail helped investigators quickly track down the car's owner, a local milkman named Colin. Police realized they had spoken to Colin before, right after Claire's murder. Back then, he had contacted them to report seeing a man with dark hair near the crime scene. But when detectives followed up with him weeks later, Colin's story had changed slightly. At first, he claimed he had been driving down that road around 6:30 p.m. Now, he insisted it was closer to 5:30. Still, he had an alibi. His mother told police they had been driving together, and were already home when Claire was attacked. But now there was more reason for suspicion. Colin drove the same white Ford witnesses had seen near the recent attack, and he was known for always wearing a light-colored trench coat, just like the one several witnesses described near both crime scenes. He also had light-colored hair, and 2 people had reported seeing a fair-haired man near the alley where Claire was murdered. That was enough for detectives to start seriously considering him as a suspect and to obtain a warrant to search his home. Inside, police found a large knife that matched the wounds on the most recent victim. But that was just the beginning. During the search, they also discovered a hidden journal, and what was written inside left everyone stunned. In the diary, Colin admitted that he was the one who had attacked the woman back in 1988. He called it his masterpiece and even rated the crime, giving it a 95% success rate. When he later learned that the victim had survived, he wrote that next time he would do better. He also described trying to sneak into a care home to kill someone, but said the plan had failed. Even more disturbing, he mentioned that some of his friends used to jokingly call him a killer after that first attack because of how obsessed he was with knives. He also said he had threatened his first victim, warning her that if she gave his description to the police, he would hurt someone else. On top of that, Colin confessed to the 1995 stabbing. He wrote that he had gotten angry with his girlfriend that day, convinced she was cheating on him. Fueled by rage, he drove around looking for someone to take it out on. First, he saw a man but decided that was too risky. Then, he spotted a woman walking alone, stopped the car, and attacked her. He said he felt a wave of relief afterward and didn't care whether the woman lived or died. The diary also detailed his plans to commit more murders and mentioned that he had broken into the homes of several women he knew while they were away. When police searched Colin's car, they found blood-stained clothes and a torn piece of a tie, which, as it turned out, he had used in an attempt to strangle his first victim. That alone was more than enough to charge him in connection with the attacks on both women. Detectives were also fairly certain he was responsible for Claire's murder and began searching for a possible connection. It didn't take long to find one. Colin's family knew Claire's. They both spent time at the same local community center where residents gathered to socialize. In fact, Claire had celebrated her birthday there just 4 days before she died, and Colin had been at that same venue that night. Investigators also confirmed that he attended her funeral. Still, they didn't have a single piece of solid evidence linking him directly to her murder. While Colin sat behind bars, detectives questioned him, but he denied everything. He did, however, offer a theory. According to him, the killer might have been a man who used to play pool with Claire at the community center. Colin said the man left town shortly after the murder, and that the last time he saw him was at Claire's funeral. Police tracked the man down, but he didn't match any of the witness descriptions of the person seen near the crime scene. Colin, on the other hand, matched them perfectly, but there still wasn't enough evidence to make it stick. In the end, Colin was only charged in connection with the 2 attacks from 1988 and 1995. In December 1996, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 life terms, with the possibility of parole after just 15 years. But investigators weren't ready to let go. They continued searching for anything that could finally bring justice for Claire. Out of all the possible suspects, Colin still made the most sense. But there were 2 major problems: the lack of physical evidence and his alibi. As mentioned earlier, his mother had told police that she and Colin were out delivering flyers and were already home by the time Claire was killed. But here's the thing: Colin himself had called police the day after the murder and claimed to have seen a man with dark hair near the scene about an hour later. That call actually contradicted his own alibi. Based on what he told them, he would have had to be right near the alley when Claire was attacked. That got detectives thinking, was his mother lying to protect him? After all, she wasn't just any mother. She was a former political party advisor, just like her husband, and she also happened to be the town's sitting mayor. When police confronted the parents again, they stuck to their story, insisting their son had nothing to do with the murder. Still, detectives kept digging, and eventually they uncovered the truth. Colin's alibi had been completely fabricated. They found solid proof that his mother hadn't been with him that evening, which meant she had lied to protect her son. But that wasn't the only discovery. Investigators also learned something else, something just as disturbing. It turned out that Colin's father had disposed of a knife his son brought home after the 1995 attack. He admitted to boiling it in water, taking it apart, and getting rid of the pieces just hours before police arrived with a search warrant. For that, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. As for Colin's mother, her involvement didn't end there. Later on, she gave an interview to a local TV station and claimed it had actually been her idea for her husband to get rid of the knife. She said she truly believed her son was innocent and feared the police would try to pin someone else's crime on him. But even with everything they had uncovered, police still didn't have enough evidence to charge Colin with Claire's murder. While he served time for the other attacks, detectives continued digging into his past, hoping to find anything that could finally tie him to the crime, but nothing ever came of it. The only new discovery came during a routine search of his prison cell. Officers found several disturbing notes, filled with dark and graphic fantasies about women he knew. Just like the pages from his old diary, they painted a deeply unsettling picture of his mindset. With no solid leads in Claire's case, investigators also began considering other possible suspects. One was a local man who had killed his own mother in 1994. After the murder, he left behind a note saying she had started to suspect him of being the one who murdered Claire. Another suspect was serial killer Robert Napper. He had been convicted of killing 3 people, but detectives couldn't find any concrete link between him and Claire's case. From that point on, the investigation essentially came to a standstill. Claire's parents were convinced Colin was the killer, and the fact that police still couldn't charge him weighed heavily on them. In 2008, Claire's mother passed away from cancer, and in 2012, her father died as well. Neither lived to see justice for their daughter. Then, in 2013, the case drew public attention once again when detectives renewed their efforts to bring the killer to justice. They issued another appeal to the public asking for any information, and even the Prime Minister voiced support for their investigation. The tips that came in didn't lead anywhere, until one of Colin's former cellmates came forward with a story that completely changed the direction of the case. He claimed that one day Colin had bragged about attacking a girl. According to him, Colin said he saw her at a crosswalk and that something in him just snapped. That detail immediately caught detectives' attention, since Claire had been using a crosswalk that led directly into the alley where she was attacked. The other two victims, however, had been found nowhere near crosswalks. That single clue strongly suggested Colin had been talking about Claire, or possibly another victim who had never been discovered. Still, detectives doubted there were any other victims, as no similar unsolved cases had been reported in the area. After speaking with Colin's former cellmate, police secured another warrant and returned to his house, hoping to uncover new evidence. As expected, they didn't find anything major, but something still caught their attention: a newspaper clipping about Claire's murder, published a year after she was killed. It wasn't enough to prove guilt, but detectives decided it was time to present everything they had and try to take the case to trial. By then, a new law had come into effect in the UK that allowed prosecutors to introduce a suspect's prior convictions in court, something that could be a game-changer for Claire's case. Colin was already serving time for 2 violent attacks, both strikingly similar to what had happened to Claire and committed just miles from where she was killed. Now, in addition to that, investigators had testimony from his former cellmate and solid proof that Colin's alibi had been fabricated. That was finally enough for prosecutors to move forward. On February 12, 2014, detectives announced that Colin had been officially charged with Claire's murder. The timing was no coincidence. It happened on the very same day his first parole hearing was scheduled. Instead of walking free, he remained behind bars, and prosecutors began preparing for trial. It took nearly a year for the case to reach court. Colin pleaded not guilty, but by then he had already admitted to attacking 2 other women, and this time, he revealed even more disturbing details. He said he began sneaking out of the house at night when he was around 19 or 20, taking a knife with him and wandering the streets, hoping to find someone he could kill. According to Colin, it was all about feeling powerful, feeling like he had control over someone else, because he didn't want to be seen as weak. His ex-girlfriend also testified, saying Colin had started acting strangely right after Claire was murdered. At the time, she thought he was simply shaken like everyone else in town, but looking back, she realized there was more to it. When Colin was asked how he felt about women in general, he said he both loved and hated them. He admitted he struggled with low self-esteem and constantly felt worthless, which made it hard for him to trust anyone, especially women. He also revealed that he kept a collection of 20 to 30 knives at home, along with a crossbow and several air rifles, and apparently, his parents were fully aware of it. Colin even admitted he never left the house without a knife. When it was time for his former cellmate to testify, the prosecution hit an unexpected snag. The man said he couldn't clearly remember what Colin had told him and admitted he might have been confusing the conversation with someone else. Still, he shared one strange detail. He and the other inmates used to joke about how Colin had stabbed his victims multiple times, but somehow missed all their vital organs. It became a running joke, especially when they played darts. The trial also took a sudden and heartbreaking turn when Claire's cousin suffered a heart attack during one of the sessions and had to be rushed to the hospital. Later, the prosecution called a former mayor to the stand, who shared something revealing about Colin's mother. At the time, she was a local councillor, and because of her position, she managed to attend a closed police briefing. There, she repeatedly pressed detectives for information about a car seen near the crime scene and demanded to know every detail. Considering she had also helped her son fake an alibi, the whole thing appeared deeply suspicious. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and in December 2014, the jury reached its verdict. Colin was found guilty of murdering Claire Tiltman. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 21 years. When the verdict was read, Colin showed no emotion. He later appealed the decision, but the court rejected it, stating that the evidence against him was overwhelming. After 26 long years, justice was finally served. In Claire's memory, local officials named a road after her, and later even renamed a street using her last name. In 2022, a new community center opened its doors, proudly bearing Claire Tilghman's name. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned, and brace yourself for what's coming next.